The Detroit 36th District Courthouse loomed like a forgotten sentinel on Gratiot Avenue, sandwiched between a pawn shop with flickering neon signs and a boarded-up diner that had long since surrendered to the city's relentless decay. The building itself was a relic, its brick facade weathered by decades of harsh Michigan winters and indifferent summers. Inside, the air hung heavy with the stale scent of old coffee, mingled with the sharp tang of copier toner, under the relentless buzz of fluorescent lights that cast a pallid glow over scuffed tile floors. It was a place where justice was meted out in measured doses, often amid the chaos of overflowing dockets and underfunded resources. For Judge Clarissa Benton, this courthouse had been more than a workplace. It had been her proving ground since the late 1990s, when she first stepped through its doors as a fresh-faced law clerk from Wayne State University. Back then, she had been full of fire, tempered by the wisdom of mentors who reminded her of the invisible barriers she would face. One judge, in particular, had pulled her aside during a late-night session, his voice gravelly from years on the bench. "You've got to be twice as good to get half as far." Clarissa had smiled politely, nodding as if it were new information, but those words had etched themselves into her soul. She carried them with her every day, a silent mantra that fueled her ascent from clerk to prosecutor to, finally, judge. Now in her mid-50s, with silver threads weaving through her tightly coiled hair and lines of experience etched around her sharp brown eyes, she embodied the authority she had earned through sheer grit. On this particular day, the drizzle outside mirrored the summer mood inside the courthouse. Clarissa arrived early, as was her habit, her long black robe draped over one arm like a cloak of responsibility. In her left hand, she clutched a weathered briefcase stuffed with case files, legal pads, and a few personal mementos. A faded photo of her father, a bus mechanic who had instilled in her the value of quiet persistence. Her right hand held a steaming cup of coffee from Perry's Deli across the street, the brew a perfect balance of sweet and slightly burnt, just the way she liked it to kickstart her focus. She moved with purposeful strides, her low-heeled shoes clicking against the tiles, avoiding the small talk that often filled the hallways. Trust was a commodity she doled out sparingly, and in this building only a handful had earned it. Janelle Ruiz, the bailiff assigned to her courtroom, was one such person. A no-nonsense woman in her 40s with a sharp uniform and an even sharper intuition. Janelle had been with Clarissa for over a decade. As they entered the courtroom together, Janelle offered a curt morning, "Judge," her voice carrying the warmth of familiarity without overstepping into casualness. "Morning, Ruiz," Clarissa replied, her tone steady. "We have the Taylor arraignment first." "Yep," Janelle confirmed, glancing at her clipboard. "Defendants already here. Prosecution's running late, and the two officers listed as primary on the arrest aren't here yet either." Clarissa sighed softly, slipping into her robe with practiced ease. The fabric felt heavy today, a reminder of the weight it carried. It was supposed to be a straightforward day. Just 3 cases, an illegal search motion, a minor weapons charge, and the Taylor arraignment for resisting arrest. Resisting arrest charges always drew her extra scrutiny. They were often vague, open to interpretation, and sometimes veiled in deeper issues. She adjusted her glasses, perched on the bridge of her nose, and took her seat at the bench, surveying the room. The wooden panels, worn from years of use, absorbed the dim light, and the gallery benches creaked under the weight of early arrivals. Family members, attorneys, and the occasional curious onlooker. At precisely 9 o'clock, she tapped her gavel lightly, the sound echoing like a call to order. Court is now in session. The defendant, Mr. Taylor, sat at the defense table, flanked by his public defender, a young attorney who looked barely out of law school, his wide eyes betraying his inexperience. Taylor himself was a young black man in his early 20s, his face still swollen from the arrest, a purple bruise blooming across his cheek. Clarissa noted it immediately, filing it away as a detail that demanded explanation. The assistant district attorney Ada rushed in moments later, flustered and juggling a stack of files, muttering apologies under her breath. Clarissa acknowledged her with a nod but said nothing, her expression neutral. But the officers, Sergeant Tom Redding and Officer Mike Halpern, were conspicuously absent. Their presence was required for clarification on the arrest details, and their tardiness wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a blatant show of disrespect. Clarissa glanced at the clock, her patience thinning, but she maintained her composure, reviewing the file once more. At 7 minutes past the hour, the courtroom door swung open with a loud creak, drawing all eyes. In walked the two officers, their entrance more akin to patrons entering a casual bar than professionals stepping into a hall of justice. Sergeant Redding led the way, a burly man in his late 40s with a swagger that spoke of unchecked authority accumulated over years on the force. His uniform was crisp, but his demeanor was anything but casual, almost defiant. Behind him trailed Officer Halpern, younger, perhaps in his 30s, chewing gum with audible smacks, his arms swinging loosely at his sides. They didn't glance at the bench, didn't offer an apology, didn't even pause to acknowledge the proceedings they had disrupted. "Gentlemen," Clarissa's voice cut through the room like a blade, calm but unyielding. "You were due at 9. Redding shrugged, his broad shoulders rising dismissively. "Traffic." Clarissa's eyes narrowed slightly behind her glasses. "You're testifying in a felony arraignment that requires punctuality." "Sure thing, ma'am," Redding replied, his tone laced with sarcasm, the ma'am hanging in the air like a deliberate slight. "Not your honor, not even judge, just a diminutive that reduced her to something lesser." She glanced at Janelle, who met her eyes briefly before looking away, having caught the disrespect as well. Clarissa leaned forward, her voice measured. "Let the record show that Sergeant Redding and Officer Halpern have arrived 7 minutes late. This court recognizes all parties when they address the bench properly. That includes using the title, Your Honor. Please make note of that moving forward." Redding offered a tight smile, devoid of sincerity, while Halpern remained impassive, his gum chewing uninterrupted. It wasn't the first time Clarissa had faced such microaggressions. The subtle digs that stayed just within the bounds of politeness, but screamed volumes about underlying biases. As a black woman wielding the gavel in a city like Detroit, she had grown accustomed to them, but today, something about their flippancy struck a deeper chord. Perhaps it was Taylor's bruised face, or Halpern's casual lean against the wall, as if the courtroom were his personal lounge. Whatever it was, it ignited a quiet resolve in her chest. Still, she proceeded professionally. "Let's move forward." She allowed the aider to present her statement, then turned to the officers for their account of the arrest. Halpern remained leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, his posture sloppy despite his sharp uniform. It was as if he believed nothing in this room truly mattered. Redding stepped forward, clearing his throat with the clipped authority of a man accustomed to dominating conversations. Suspect was loitering outside the marathon on Jefferson, refused to show ID when asked, got mouthy, then resisted arrest. We followed procedure, used minimal force. Clarissa tilted her head, her expression unchanging. You approached him while he was doing what, exactly? He was just standing there, Your Honor, Redding said, though the honorific came grudgingly, standing outside a gas station on a public sidewalk. Yes, ma'am. There it was again, slower this time, probing for a reaction. She didn't flinch. Instead, she flipped a page in the file. According to the report, the suspect, Mr. Taylor, was waiting for a rideshare. Is that correct? Maybe he didn't say. Yet your report states he failed to comply after you told him to vacate the premises. Redding nodded. That's right, but the station owner never filed a complaint. There was no call for service. No, ma'am, it was a patrol check. We're encouraged to keep the area clear. High theft spot. Clarissa peered over the rim of her glasses. So you saw a young man standing alone and decided he looked suspicious. Redding hesitated, glancing at Halpern, who continued chewing indifferently. Protocol, Your Honor. Clarissa sat back, her mind racing through the implications. This wasn't just routine, it smelled of overreach. This court will require body cam footage before this arraignment can proceed to trial. I'm ordering it to be submitted within 48 hours. No footage, no case. The aider scribbled notes frantically, while Taylor's public defender perked up. Taylor himself lifted his eyes to meet Clarissa's for the first time, a flicker of hope in his gaze. Clarissa addressed Redding. Do you have any objections, Sergeant? He smirked. No, Your Honor. Then, under his breath, but not quietly enough, this is what happens when they let activists wear robes. Gasps rippled through the gallery, low murmurs following. A sharp "Yo, what?" came from the back row. Janelle stiffened, her hand instinctively moving toward her belt. Clarissa didn't react immediately. She sat still, glasses halfway down her nose, eyes locked on Redding. You want to repeat that, Sergeant? Nope. He shrugged. Didn't say it loud. Thought it was off the record. Clarissa pressed a button under her desk. Bailiff, clear the gallery. Janelle moved swiftly, ushering everyone out. Spectators, attorneys, even Taylor. Within minutes, the room was empty save for Clarissa, the two officers, and Janelle. Clarissa removed her glasses, folding them slowly, and stood, her 5-foot 4 frame commanding the space. You two have come into my courtroom late, disregarded the rules of decorum, addressed me with deliberate disrespect, and now one of you has made a derogatory statement that is not only personal but inappropriate in a court of law. Halpern rolled his eyes. Jesus, can we not? Officer Halpern. Clarissa cut him off, her voice like steel. I suggest you remain silent unless spoken to directly. He shifted but stayed quiet. She turned to Redding. Let me be very clear. I have spent 23 years earning the right to wear this robe. I have worked in this city through budget cuts, building closures, threats, protests, and more shattered lives than you'll ever have to write reports about. Redding looked at the floor, his swagger deflated. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to agree with how I interpret the law. But when you walk into this courtroom, you will respect the bench, you will respect this court, and you will respect me, not because I demand it, but because the people of this city expect it. And if you can't handle that, I suggest you find another job, preferably one that doesn't involve a badge and a weapon. The room fell silent, even Halpern's chewing ceased. Clarissa sat back down, slipping on her glasses. Let the parties return. As the doors reopened, the energy shifted, whispers died, postures straightened. The courtroom now understood the authority behind the robe, but the day was far from over, and the tensions were only beginning to simmer. Clarissa proceeded with the next case, her voice steady as if the confrontation had been a mere footnote. The gallery returned quietly, each person taking their seat with a newfound caution. The young man in the second row who had been texting slipped his phone away, sitting up straight. Clarissa didn't acknowledge the change. She didn't need to. Her silence was her power, thick and deliberate. State of Michigan versus Shauna Hill, she announced. A young black woman in her late 20s was escorted to the defendant's table, her hands cuffed, her face etched with exhaustion. The charges were misdemeanor shoplifting, first offense, item value under $20. The aider presented quickly, but Clarissa's eyes scanned the file, noting the arresting officer, Mike Halpern. "Miss Hill, you are currently employed?" Clarissa asked calmly. "Yes, Your Honor. I work at a food prep center. Wasn't working that day. Helping my sister's kids." Halpern leaned forward, interrupting. She was stuffing. "You'll speak when asked, officer," Clarissa said without looking at him. The public defender stood. "We're requesting pretrial diversion. No priors." Client panicked when her EBT didn't go through. Clarissa nodded, reviewing the file. Officer Halpern, was body cam footage reviewed and submitted with the report? No, ma'am. Sorry, no, Your Honor." "And yet, you listed yourself as the sole witness." "Yeah." "Store manager refused to give a statement. So you wrote a report with no corroboration, no footage, and you're interrupting this court to insert commentary without being asked. Am I missing anything?" Halpern didn't answer. "Request for diversion is granted. Miss Hill, you'll attend 1 day of community mediation and submit proof of completion. Case dismissed upon compliance. You're free to go." Miss Hill blinked, tears welling. That's it. As Hill was led out, whispering thanks, Clarissa felt the weight of eyes upon her. Justice, she had learned, was in the details. The tone, the consistency. But the officers remained, arms folded, waiting for a slip. During the next case, Redding laughed when the defendant mispronounced arraignment. Clarissa wrote something down deliberately. Then came the papers they accidentally dropped near her bench. Halpern pretended not to hear instructions, forcing repeats. Ruiz whispered during a break, "Want me to remove them? You have grounds." "Not yet," Clarissa replied, "but we're close." It wasn't ego, it was control. These men resented her authority, wanted to paint her as petty. She refused. In her chambers during a brief recess, the door cracked. She overheard Redding. "I'm telling you, Halpern, this one's just waiting for someone to call her Your Majesty so she can lose it. Probably writes speeches in her mirror." Clarissa's coffee had gone cold. She breathed deeply, each slight sharpening her resolve. The day pressed on, cases blending into one another, but the undercurrent of tension grew. Clarissa handled each with precision, her rulings fair, her demeanor unshakable. Yet as the hours wore on, she sensed the storm building. The officers' provocations were calculated, pushing boundaries without crossing into outright insubordination. Redding's smirks, Halpern's gum chewing. They were tests, probes to see if she would crack. In one case, a minor weapons charge, the defendant, a middle-aged man with a history of petty offenses, stumbled through his plea. Halpern, testifying, embellished details, his voice dripping with condescension. Clarissa interrupted. "Officer, stick to facts, not interpretations." He muttered something under his breath, but she let it slide, noting it for the record. By midday, the courtroom felt charged, the air thick with unspoken challenges. Clarissa called for a short recess, retreating to her chambers. There, she reviewed notes, her mind replaying the morning's events. The disrespect wasn't new, but today it felt amplified, as if the officers had come prepared to play power games. A knock came, Leland, her clerk, with an email printout from Alicia Vaughn, civil rights attorney. Body cam clip from Taylor's arrest. Leaked to her office. It's bad. Clarissa clicked the link. The footage was grainy but damning. Taylor waiting peacefully, officers approaching aggressively, no resistance, excessive force. It contradicted everything Redding had said. She exhaled, the pieces falling into place. This changed everything. Back in court, she announced the new evidence, referring it to the DA and internal review. Taylor was released on recognizance. Redding's face tightened, but he said nothing. The afternoon cases proceeded, but the officer's confidence waned. Halpern fumbled testimony. Redding interrupted once more. Clarissa shut them down firmly. As the day drew toward its close, news of the footage spread, phones buzzing in the gallery. Clarissa felt the shift. The courtroom, no longer just a room, but a stage. Yet she remained calm, her authority unshaken, ready for whatever came next. With the revelation of the body cam footage hanging in the air like an unspoken verdict, the courtroom's atmosphere thickened, each breath seeming to carry the weight of impending reckoning. Clarissa Benton sat at her bench, her posture impeccable, as if the robe she wore was not just fabric, but armor forged from years of navigating a system that often seemed designed to undermine those like her. The gallery, now abuzz with whispers and furtive glances at phones, reflected the rapid spread of the news. The footage, leaked and viral in moments, had transformed the day's proceedings from routine to riveting. But Clarissa didn't allow the distraction to derail her. She called the next case with the same steady voice that had commanded respect all morning. The bond review for a public nuisance charge came first. A middle-aged woman accused of disrupting a neighborhood gathering. The prosecutor pushed for detention, citing prior warnings, but Clarissa delved into the details, questioning the arresting officer, not Redding or Halpern, thankfully with pointed precision. Was there property damage? Threats of violence? No, Your Honor, just loud arguments. And the complainant, is this a pattern or a one-off? The officer hesitated. One-off from what I know. Clarissa nodded, her decision swift. Bond set at $500, own recognizance. Attend mediation, next case. As the woman was led away, expressing quiet gratitude, Clarissa caught Redding shifting in his seat, his earlier smirk replaced by a scowl. Halpern, still chewing but less audibly, avoided her gaze. The footage had stripped away their veneer of invincibility, exposing the cracks in their narrative. Yet they remained, perhaps out of obligation or defiance, their presence a silent challenge. The petty theft case followed, a young man in his teens charged with stealing groceries from a corner store. The ADA argued for juvenile detention, emphasizing the value of the items, but Clarissa reviewed the file meticulously. First offense, family situation. The public defender nodded. Lives with grandmother, helps with siblings, panicked decision. Clarissa turned to the store owner in the gallery. Do you wish to press full charges, or is restitution acceptable? The owner, an elderly man, shrugged. Restitution's fine. Kids from the neighborhood. Community service, 20 hours. Charges dropped upon completion. Her ruling drew murmurs, but no objections. Justice, in her view, was restorative when possible, not punitive for its own sake. Throughout these cases, the officers attempted subtle disruptions. Redding coughing loudly during testimony, Halpern rustling papers unnecessarily. Clarissa ignored them, her focus laser sharp, but internally she catalogued each act. This was no longer just about the Taylor arraignment. It was a battle for the sanctity of the court itself. During a brief recess, Clarissa retreated to her chambers, the door slightly ajar. Leland entered with updates. The footage is everywhere. Local news, social media. People are demanding accountability. Clarissa nodded, sipping cold tea. Let them, my job is here. But the pressure mounted. A text from Alicia, videos blowing up. You're the story now. Back in court, Redding stood uninvited. Your Honor, if I may clarify on Taylor. You may not, Sergeant. You're not on this docket. He rambled about tech issues, but Clarissa cut him off. Let the record reflect Sergeant Redding's unsolicited interruption. Halpern's testimony in a later case wavered, details fuzzy. Officer, if unsure, say so. Guesswork has no place here. Yes, Your Honor. The correction came grudgingly, but it was a crack in their facade. As the afternoon wore on, the courtroom became a microcosm of the city's tensions. Spectators grew, drawn by the buzzing news. Clarissa handled a robbery case, non-violent juvenile, with mercy, releasing the teen to guardianship with conditions. Heads turned, but she stood firm. An envelope arrived from Internal Affairs, a preliminary inquiry into the officers. Clarissa read it silently, her expression unchanged. Councilwoman Bernice Greer appeared, observing quietly. During a break, she approached. We're watching, prepared to hold them accountable. Clarissa replied evenly, I'm just doing my job. The day intensified with more cases. A drug possession charge dismissed for lack of evidence. A domestic dispute resolved through counseling. Each ruling reinforced her commitment to fairness, but the officers' glares intensified. In chambers again, Ruiz reported, press outside. Your words are going viral, respect the bench, because the people expect it. Clarissa stared at a photo of her father. Then let's make them count. The docket continued, tensions peaking when Halpern interrupted again. Clarissa reprimanded sharply, the room falling silent. By late afternoon, the chief judge pulled her aside, saw the footage. You handled it right. I'm not making enemies, she said. You're reminding us of our backbone. Back at the bench, Clarissa wrapped the final cases, her resolve unbroken. The day's events had coalesced into a singular test of authority, one she met with unyielding poise. As the courthouse corridors echoed with the fading footsteps of departing clerks and attorneys, Judge Clarissa Benton remained in her chambers, the weight of the day's events settling like dust. After a storm, the lentil soup on her desk had long gone cold, untouched amid the stack of files and the sealed envelope from Internal Affairs. The inquiry documents detailed timelines and statements, their bureaucratic language a stark contrast to the raw humanity of the courtroom. Clarissa stood by the small window, her reflection in the glass a portrait of quiet fatigue, not defeat, but the toll of unwavering vigilance. The parking lot below was emptying, cars pulling away under the dimming sky, but her mind replayed the footage, the confrontations, the subtle shifts in power. A call from Judge Crenshaw, her old mentor, broke the silence. You've been on every screen, handling it, yes. They're waiting for a slip. Keep your voice cool. She smiled faintly. I'll try. After hanging up, she pulled out a yellow legal pad, writing a reminder to herself. Speak with precision, move with purpose, answer to the law and the people. Ruiz knocked, handing a screenshot of her viral quote. "They're quoting you nationally, then every word counts." The pressure from the police association mounted, a statement calling the footage misleading and her courtroom hostile. An anonymous blog accused her of bias. Clarissa read them without reaction, dressing her responses in silence. A complaint filed by Redding, Halpern, and Captain Bow arrived. Conduct, bias, misuse of authority. Ruiz, they're trying to undermine you. Let them try. News broke, headlines twisting the narrative. Reporters swarmed. A press conference by Bow hinted at certain judicial figures obstructing police work. Clarissa didn't respond emotionally, prioritizing her docket. More cases, dismissals, diversions, each handled with consistency. Alicia called, "Your silence is being twisted. Speak on your terms." By afternoon's end, Ruiz set up a recording. Clarissa spoke into the camera. "I wasn't elected to be liked, but to apply the law fairly. I held officers accountable, not with volume, but principle." The video uploaded, spreading rapidly, shifting public opinion. Comments praised her calm. National figures commented. The next morning's mood, no. The day concluded with the chief judge's approval and Clarissa reviewing motions. Resolution came swiftly. Complaint dismissed, no bias found. Redding reassigned, Halpern on leave. Taylor's charges dropped, civil suit pending. Ruiz brought lilies, you stood tall. Clarissa visited juvenile court, speaking to students. Calm and right scares them most. Hold your ground. Outside, the crowd gone, but her impact lingered. The robe meant something now, easing the path for those who followed. The story ended not with fanfare, but quiet assurance, respect earned, never begged.
If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.